Managing our flood protection as we continue to see this storm cycle and the pipeline of moisture come in from the Pacific. We are breaking it all down with multiple waves of wet weather still to come in our forecast. This is a steady storm cycle, like I said, just pulling in this moisture from the Pacific and a couple more storms to go before we get that break. Our timeline is as follows. On Tuesday, we're going to get a brief period of heavy rain and wind, also some thunderstorms and snow for the Sierra. Wednesday, it's going to be a mix of rain and snow for the Sierra and some more rain for the valley. Thursday, just a few light showers possible, but mostly a dry day before that next round of wet weather arrives late Friday into Saturday. That is a developing system, though, and the models have been flip-flopping a bit on how soon the rain will arrive Friday into Saturday. All right, starting off with the first storm that rolls in for tonight. It's the back edge of actually the storm that started on Monday. Wind advisory back into play early Tuesday through Tuesday afternoon. Wind gusts 30 to 40 miles per hour and south winds 15 to 25 miles per hour. Tree limbs could come down. Possible power outages. Now, the key factor here is the ground is so saturated, it's not going to take much wind to bring down additional trees, not in a widespread fashion like what we saw Saturday night into Sunday morning, but certainly very vulnerable to more widespread power outages for the potential of more tree limbs and trees coming down. Peak wind gusts for today at about 30 to 45 miles per hour in the valley and the foothills, and in the Sierra some gusty conditions as well. Playing out tonight's line of storms that comes through. By early Tuesday, winds are starting to pick up. It's during the very early morning hours between roughly about 4 and 6 a.m. that we start to see that funnel come right through the valley. Modesto actually seeing some earlier peak wind gusts closer to about 4 to 5 a.m. in the morning with gusts up to about 40 miles per hour. That will start to translate its way northward throughout the course of the morning. So during the morning commute, things are kind of rocking and rolling here on the 80 and 50 corridor right through the Sierra, where we'll also see some very gusty winds and problems with some avalanche control as well. Winds start to calm down during the afternoon, but those winds are also in the sequence of when we're going to see some of the strongest rain come through from the back edge of this weather system. Some of the strongest storms now moving their way southward, and it is a disaster in Southern California. We've got a flash flood warning in effect until midnight with heavy rain, life-threatening flooding, and feet of water over some of the roads. That stretches from San Luis Obispo through Santa Barbara and parts of the Los Angeles region as well. We've had a lot of recent wildfires as well, so that could potentially lead to some mudslides in that region. We'll be watching that closely. In the meantime, local rainfall amounts from the first wave coming through 1 to 2 inches in the valley, close to that for the foothills, and it was a mix of rain and snow for the Sierra. Most of that coming to an end, but here comes the next wave again. Here's that line of heavy rain right about 3 a.m. That'll stretch right along I-5, Highway 99 into the Central Valley. That's when we start to see some of those winds in conjunction with that line and possible embedded thunderstorms as well. We're still going to deal with more moisture coming through during the day and snow for the Sierra. That'll last all the way through midnight on Wednesday, and then we get Wednesday's storm coming through. That just kind of shows you a timeline there of how quickly these are coming in one after the other. Total rainfall from that line on Tuesday will be roughly about a ½ inch to an inch for the valley. Some of the upper valley and lower foothill locations, 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And then as we move up in elevation, it is going to be a mix of rain and snow, but about 2 to 3+ inches possible for the foothills. And again, we're going to see that snow line coming and going, but roughly about 1 to 4 feet of new snow possible for the high country. Here's just a general layout of what we're expecting along 80 and 50. Traveling will be difficult with snow line about 4,800 to 5,300 feet early Tuesday. That is going to be well below the passes. It stays there through Tuesday night. And then by Wednesday, we're going to start to see the warmer part of the system ripple on through, and that's going to bring that snow line up. But all in all, it looks like right now that snow level will stay below the passes, which is good news in one sense because we won't get rain on top of snow, adding additional runoff concerns. But when we have those lower snow levels, you know that means long travel in the Sierra. Our winter storm warning continues through 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday. Mountain impacts include that 1 to 4 feet of new snow, wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour, and dangerous travel. Anytime we have conditions like that in the Sierra, it's always difficult and could be long delays, if not closures. Now, with the winds, as well as the rain-snow mix, we now have an avalanche warning through Wednesday. That's going to be for the backcountry throughout the Sierra. Large avalanches possible. Ski resorts are going to have to very closely monitor this for the safety of anybody skiing and snowboarding up there. Our snow driving hazards, we could have near whiteout conditions, major travel delays, as well as chain controls, and at times the road closures are possible in the high country. And for valley locations, we're going to be right back at it with roadway flooding, local street flooding, rises on creeks and streams. And the message remains: turn around, don't drown. We don't want any repeat of anybody that's been stuck here over the course of the past week or so from the valley flooding. Our flood watch continues through Wednesday. Rainfall and runoff adding to the additional pressure on so many of our waterways, including our levees, which have really been pushed to capacity at times as that water continues to make its way downstream. A look at one of the areas that we were very closely monitoring, had a flood warning out earlier that was canceled because the new predictive models are showing that Cosumnes River at Michigan Bar is going to remain below flood stage. Earlier, we were expecting that to hit that flood stage this afternoon. Now that is just below that threshold. I will just put this out there, though, that we have more rain coming. So we're going to have to monitor this closely because it's just running so terribly high. And we've seen a lot of flooding out in the Wilton area. Now, the other place that we've been watching is the Sacramento River at the I Street Bridge. The crest, again, has come down slightly from what was forecasted. It's now at 27.8 feet, nowhere near a record high. But the key number there is that the Department of Water Resources would open the Sacramento Weir if and when that gauge reaches 29.87. Just about 2 days ago, it was looking like that was going to happen. Now, the water has started to recede. Things are starting to flatten out a little bit, and it looks like that crest will be below that threshold. So why so much focus on the Sacramento Weir? It seems like a funny name to begin with, but what is the relevance for flooding in the valley? Well, let's take it step by step. First of all, the valley is a natural floodplain. It is meant to flood. The idea is to put that flood water in areas that can actually benefit from it and not hit big metropolitan areas. So when you look at a big metropolitan area like Sacramento and the access to all the rivers that flow into it, either by directly flowing into it or through the confluence a little bit upstream, like the Feather River and the Sacramento River, that's a tremendous amount of water flowing towards the downtown area. The Feather River upstream is Lake Oroville, and then the Sacramento River upstream is going to be Shasta. That's our biggest reservoir in the state. That holds a lot of water. So if it's letting water out and water's flowing downstreams, that puts a lot of water downstream into the Sacramento River. So how do we ease the pressure of that? Well, we have what are called weirs. Some of them are just naturally flowing. When the water gets to the level of the weir, they're like little gates in the river. Water just starts flowing from it. Sacramento Weir, it's the only manually operated weir in the system. So people actually have to go out and crank open the gates to open them up to relieve pressure downstream. So the water would come out if the gates were open. They're not quite open yet. The last time that happened was 2017. But look at how closely this is to all this metropolitan area, all this development here. So we open up the gates, and what happens is that flows into what's called the Yolo bypass. For those of you that are familiar, that is the water that flows right over I-80 as you head westbound into San Francisco. If you're heading out from Davis, that is your eastbound travel into Sacramento. So that's where the water flows very naturally, and it benefits a lot of wildlife. There's a lot of ecosystems that benefit from that water coming out there. So that's the idea. We want to put it in areas that can handle the water. We'll still be monitoring the rivers, even though many of them have come below that flood threshold. We're at 64 that are at normal conditions throughout the state, 25 above monitoring, and 11 that are above flood. Most of those are actually in the central and southern part of the state. So most of the northern part of the state is handling this water pretty well. On Tuesday, we get that next line of wet weather coming through, and that's going to be followed on Wednesday. Now, again, interestingly enough, Thursday into Friday, the weather models are starting to shift a little bit on how soon that wet weather returns. It looks like later on Friday into Saturday. So how is this helping, hurting the drought? What's going on in that capacity? Because drought typically ends in flooding, and we've been seeing plenty of it. Well, the last time that we got the drought monitor that had the models come out was last Tuesday. So this is what things were looking like. It's going to look a bit different for this week, but we were just on a call with the Department of Water Resources, and they were saying, yeah, the numbers look good. As far as our rainfall, we're above average. And for snowpack, we're also above average. Again, something that looks good, but it's our reservoir situation. And for our biggest one, as I mentioned, Shasta, we're only at 39% full and 64% of average. So we're not at average yet to get us out of drought. Oroville's going to be our next biggest one. 81% of average, only 44% full. Folsom is 103% of average, 43% full. But we're going to take a closer look at Folsom, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. New Melones, Don Pedro, again, below average, just slightly for Don Pedro, but only about 30 to 65% full. All right, let's go back to Folsom for just a minute. It is one of our smaller reservoirs, but it feeds a good metropolitan area. Millions of people actually rely on the water from Folsom Lake. But water is coming out of Folsom Lake. They are actually letting water out. It is very controversial, I know, because we are still technically in a drought. We would want to hold on to that water, but it was getting so full. And the deal with Folsom is it's really letting water out. The Department of Water Resources letting water out right now, and it's to prevent flooding because it is a smaller reservoir. It doesn't have the capacity to have that bigger threshold to hold a lot of water. And when snow melts, it fills this reservoir, and we see the peak typically down the road. We can't hold that much water because we can't let it out fast enough if too much snow melt starts happening. And there's so much snow up there in the high country. We're at roughly 175 to over 200% of average. And if we were to look at the April 1st number, that's usually when we peak out with our snowpack. We're at this point in the season, 70 to 97% of average. That puts our statewide average at over 175% of average to date and 85% of the April 1st numbers. And we've got more on the way. In the mountains, we've got more snow in store for this week. In the foothills, more rain. Again, Thursday looks like it's going to be our dry day, but multiple atmospheric rivers continue in the pipeline. And we'll be monitoring this both for the flood risk and also what it's going to start to do to perhaps some of the flood navigation and protection devices that we have set up throughout the valley, because there's about 3 to 4 more inches of rain coming in, almost 6 inches along the coast and 5 to 10 inches of precipitous water for the foothills and the Sierra, with a much wetter forecast ahead from January 17th through the 23rd. But I will say, on the tail end of that is when we start to see that ridge of high pressure building back and perhaps a drying out for the end of the month. That's not happening right now, though, because the 10-day forecast, again, is pretty much rain straight through the next 10 days.